Hi everyone, welcome to my channel with Colorful Worlds. Today I'm doing episode 3 of the challenge of Inktober meets adult coloring book. In this challenge, I take the 31 Inktober prompts and I use it to inspire my coloring in these 31 pages from Ashley Monet's Black It Out. Today I'll be going over 5 different prompts. Without further ado, let's turn the camera over and see what I have created. So the first prompt that I have is sting, and what better page for sting than this page filled with all of these insects, some of them which could have very strong stingers indeed. I wanted to bring some cohesion to the different sticker-like layout that we have here, and I decided why not make this look a tiny bit like a cork board. And so to do so, I need to use a ton of small dots. This is basically pixel art, and it's very slow. Like, this is me in real time doing it. It took a while. And so the black background really did help, I think. And so all I had to do was take 2 different shades of brown, a tiny bit of orange, and then voila, you have your background. To make these look a bit 3-dimensional and as though they're sticking on it as opposed to 2-dimensional and flat, you need some shadows. So I used my espresso, which is from the Prismacolor set, and on the underside of each of the elements I colored in some shadows, and this really helps with the overall visual effect of making these bugs slash sticker bugs look as though they're put on the corkboard and don't quite belong to it. And here at the time lapse, you can see, voila, it makes such a huge difference having just a tiny bit of shadow on the underside to just add some dimension to a piece. Next up is just to color it all in, and I decided to make it look like the creature they're supposed to represent. So like a nice bright green for this caterpillar bug, as well as this praying mantis. Throw in some reds for some of the ladybugs. And for this ladybug, I tried to draw in some of the dots as well to make it look a bit more ladybuggy. But then for the spider, I decided pure black will just make it look flat. So I went more with a blue-gray and tried to shade it so that there are areas that were a bit lighter and areas that were a bit darker, and then just ending with my dark color for the shadows around the edges. And then that worked out. Of course, you do need some juicy highlights to make everything pop and bring it back together. And then here, when I was coloring the bee, I at first thought it was a wasp, and then I realized it was a bee. So then I tried to go over it, and I wasn't sure if bees have black heads or white heads or yellow heads. I probably should have looked at a reference photo. To make this dragonfly look sparkly, I just added some gel pen dots here and there, and that really helps with the sparkle effect on it. And because I didn't want to bring in too many different colors, I decided that the centipede was going to be red as well, but leaving just a bit of white for some highlights. In my opinion, butterflies are always like monarch butterflies. I have a hard time coloring a butterfly not using like monarch patterns, and I'll have to change that one day, but it fits, it looks well, it looks nice. And finally for the beetle, I decided to go back with greens, and then again those magical little dots for some glitter. And la voila, the sting page is done. Or so I thought, until I realized that stickers don't really go on cork boards, and so I decided that instead they're going to be pinned in. So Ashley Monet, who is the creator of this book, recently shared a video where she pinned some like dried carapaces of various insects and bugs. So I took inspiration from that, and I decided to draw a pin in for each of these ones here. So that way it's not just a sticker, it could be like an actual bug as well. And to make it look like they're pinned, I decided that these lines all had to go in the same general direction up towards the right. And then of course you need your pin head, so I just drew in the little circle and then later filled that in with white, and then that makes it look a bit like a pinhead. And so I also threw in a line next to the black to kind of make it look a bit more 2-dimensional as though it's shiny. Again, I don't really know how to draw, but this seemed to convey the effect just fine. And of course, we need a little quote bubble. So one of my very, very, very dried out quote bubble stickers, which I had to basically rip off the sheet. And so therefore I have to kind of like retouch up the outlines. This one is going to be said by the little caterpillar because there's really no other space. And what would an insect feel about being up on a cork board? Oof, this stings. Suits the prompt very well. So the second one that I have is Shredded, and I was not looking forward to this page. Ashley Monet loves her zombies, but I do not like the zombie pages. They're a bit too gory for me. So I did have this one little Courage the Cowardly Dog sticker from a Halloween party that I had gone to, and I glued it in along with and some of these other quote bubbles. And these quote bubbles they're so old that there's not even glue on the back anymore, so I have to re-glue them myself. And so Courage the Cowardly Dog is one of the few cartoons I did see when I was a kid, and one of the quotes that he says is, "Oh, what did I do?" And of course, his dog owner, I think his name's Ernest or something, his famous quote is always, "Stupid dog." And so the story then becomes that Courage the Cowardly Dog did some kind of mess up and accidentally got his owner to be like eaten by this zombie bird. And of course, Courage, being the cowardly dog, manages to always fix and solve the problems. But this here kind of demonstrates that disaster just before. I wasn't really sure what to do with the background, and I was getting a bit sick of using my paint markers for backgrounds at this point, so I just drew some squiggles to represent a floor, and I wanted this to kind of look as though it was like scratched at the top here, as though like the talons just shredded the sky slightly. I'm not sure if it looks like talons, but I was following a reference photo, and that's the best that I got. So got some very pink talon scratches up at the top, keep the colors gray and pink and cohesive, and that is the final page. So next up in my little list here is Drink, and this page is perfect because she's quite literally a vampire having a drink in a bathtub. And so for this one, I just went full-on vampire. I think that this was what the original looks like as well with Ashley Monet, and I don't really feel like changing it. She's bathing in blood, and so we need this water to be just like real nice and bloody. So I'm working with layers, starting with pink, and then my shadow layer, and then my main blood color, and hopefully that adds a bit of detail and dimension to it. Of course, some white paint pens really help with that as well. And so she's just going to be chilling here in the water, enjoying herself. And it's just like, yeah, having the time of her life, as like a vampire queen should or would. So at this point, for my little quotes, they're not showing up in the black background, so I decided to make my own little quote bubble. And so party time is the quote that I want to use for her. So I'm putting it on some printer paper and then just sort of drawing out my speech bubble, and gonna put that in instead. I'm running really low on the old ones that I have, the ones which have zero stick or tack to it, and it won't have fit on those ones anyway because the words party time are a bit too big for that anyways, and so I have to make my own. And here we come. So party time, as she's enjoying her little solo party in her little bathtub. Though I said I was going to draw in a background for each of these, I just left a little heart there instead for my background, because at this point, like, there's so much details in the foreground, I really didn't feel like adding in a background. And what could I have had it in, right? Like a floor and a wall. I'd rather just have it be as is. And here we have our little party time vampire queen chilling with herself and her candles, a good book, and a bottle of blood wine. The next prompt that I have is trunk, and the only page that reminds me of a tree is this cake page, because cakes have layers and trees have layers, and this could very well just be like a tree that had been like cut away. Injury prone seemed to be the best quote that I could find to represent it, and that's from another one of my very dried out sticker sets that I got from, or my mom got for me from a garage sale. And then I just added in these fall leaves as like an outline border for it. So not quite drawing in the background, but adding something to the background. And I think that works. And I just went with all browns for this cake to really try to make it look as though someone cut a tree and then plopped the tree on a little like stand and is eating it like cake. In order to kind of like finalize the effect for this too, I decided that strawberries can't be what is there. I have to change that out, and so I decided to turn the strawberries into acorns, thus altering the page a tiny bit as well. And for that, I just used a fine liner to like redraw it slightly and then color it on top of it, and then added dots and squiggles. So even though the original line work is there, if you look closely, from a distance, it doesn't really look like that. And I have finished my trunk cake. All right, for this next one is Ragged, and Ragged fits in with this little marionette doll very well because she gives me raggedy vibes. And so to start with this one, I decided to first see if I can make her clothes look a bit ragged by adding in some black squares and things like that to make it look like there's holes in her clothes. And then for the rest of it, I decided to just color him in using black and red as my two main color palettes. So I wanted to challenge myself a bit more and add more to the background than just the stickers in the background. And I decided, why not have it look ragged, not just because she's a raggedy doll, but because there's ragged, broken pieces of dolls that hang around her. And she's the only one who's really keeping it together. And that adds to a really nice, creepy, ragged vibe. And so to do so, I decided to trace the original line work by putting a light box behind this one here. And that's why my lighting is a bit funky. But what I'm doing is I'm tracing some of her limbs on a separate sheet of paper. I'm then outlining it with a fine liner, coloring it in, cutting it out, and then putting it into the book. So that way I have a bit of a cheat. So for someone who does not know how to draw very well, I do know how to trace, and that is exactly what I did here instead. So now it's time to fill in all the different prompts that I did, and this brings me to around halfway through the book. So the 11th prompt that I successfully did for Inktober was Sting. The 12th over here was the Shredded. 13th was Drink, 14th was Trunk, and the final one was Ragged with my little raggedy doll. And so now let's look at the final pages. Here for Sting, I have my wonderful layout of all of these little pinned bugs on a cork board. Then I have my homage to Courage the Cowardly Dog as he accidentally turns Eustace into zombie food. That then leads me to my vampire queen enjoying some me time in a bloody bathtub. And then I have my tree trunk cake covered with acorns instead of strawberries. And then finally I have my raggedy doll who's hanging in there for dear life as the other dolls around her have disintegrated into mere limbs. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.